Hello guys, welcome back to our YouTube channel. If you're a new subscriber, you're welcome. Today we're going to talk about how to make unripe plantain chips for business or for commercial purposes. So we'll start by talking about these tips that helps you to make a crunchy or perfect plantain chips. So first of all, if you look at the plantains I'm holding, they're very matured and large. So one important tip in making a crunchy and perfect plantain chips is that when you go for plantain shopping or you go to buy your plantain, you pick very matured plantain. Don't take premature plantain. This is because if you take plantains that are not mature, when slicing your plantain, you will notice that those plantains will be breaking. So looking at the video, you realize that I'm cutting and washing the plantain to make sure that there is no sand or any form of dirt in it. Is very important. This is a very important step because if you don't wash the plantain, your customers might end up complaining of dirt. After washing your plantain, the next step is to peel your plantain. If you notice, while putting a knife or cutting the plantain, I put a very thin line in the plantain. Don't try to make a deep cut into the plantain. This is to avoid breakage during slicing. So where you cut so deep into the plantain, when slicing, you notice that you start having breakage and it is not good. So you cut the plantain and make sure that the lines are very thin. You also notice that the plantain peels come off easily from the plantain. This is because, as I mentioned before, that the plantain is very matured. So where you buy plantains that are not matured, it will be very difficult for you to peel the plantain. Just look at the one peeling the plantain. It's coming off easily. That's because the plantain is matured. So take note of these steps because they will help you so you won't go through a lot of stress while prepping your plantain. After this stage, the next stage is slicing your plantain. I would like you to look at the equipment I'm using. That's a plantain slicer. You can get it anywhere in the market. Just go and ask for plantain slicer, plantain chip slicer. For people that cannot afford a machine now, it's good for you to get this slicer. It will help you. Although when using this slicer, you have to be very careful so as not to injure yourself because the blade is very sharp. The only disadvantage with this plantain chip slicer, when you have bulk orders, it will be very difficult for you to handle those bulk orders because it will be strenuous and it's actually painful. You have to expend a lot of energy. I remember when I started initially, I had that particular day, I had like 2 bunches of plantain to fry, and I made use of this plantain chip slicer. It was so stressful. Now let's move to what I call the most important step in getting a perfect plantain chips. If you notice, I placed one plantain into the pan to check how hot it is. This step is very important because if you do not know the heat or the state in which the oil is and you put your plantain might get too soggy. It might get too soggy because the oil might not be hot, or the oil might be too hot that when you put your plantain chips, it burns immediately. So it is very important that you test the plantain or the oil before you start frying in large quantities. I like to tell people that the first set of plantain you put on on the fire, I call it a sacrificial lamb because if it doesn't go too well, or maybe the oil is not too hot or the oil is too hot, you end up sacrificing the plantain. So when you found out that the oil is okay, that the temperature of the oil is okay, you start putting your plantain. You see what I'm doing? I'm not pouring the plantain into the pan. I'm using my hand to separate the plantain before I pour them into the hot pan. This is to avoid the plantain chips from gumming together. So that is why I like to separate them before putting them into the hot oil. But some people like to slice their plantains directly into the fire because this makes it easier for the plantain chips not to clog together or gum together. So depending on the one that you feel is okay for you, you choose the one that you feel is convenient for you. Like me, because of the fact that most times when I try to slice directly into the fire, the oil gets to splash on me and I don't like to do that. So looking at the video, realize that at this point, after putting the plantains, very important step is that you don't start turning the plantain immediately. Give it a few seconds, like 30 seconds before you start turning the plantain. Immediately you start turning the plantain. If you're frying plantain, you notice that the plantains stick together. So to avoid them coming together, give them a little time to get used to the oil and the fire before you start turning them. And when turning the plantain chips, please do not turn it as if you're turning soup. Look at the way I am stirring the plantain. So you stir carefully to avoid the plantain from breaking. Another important tip when frying plantain to make it come out very crunchy is that you have to monitor the heat of the fire. Whether you are frying with a gas, an industrial gas or firewood, you have to monitor the heat. So you have to keep checking whether the heat is too much or is not enough. So where the heat is too much, you notice that the plantain begin to burn, will not get done, but you start changing color. But where it is not too much, you know that it becomes too soggy. So you have to carefully watch the heat so to avoid any of these mistakes. You can still see that I'm still trying to stir the plantain, and if you look closely, you notice that I'm trying to separate some of the plantains, especially those ones that are glued together. Sometimes you cannot avoid it because you notice that some of them are glued together, but if you want to separate them, what you do it carefully, gently, because where you try to force to separate them, you notice that the plantain might end up breaking. Another important tip to getting perfect and crunchy plantain chips is not to overcrowd your pan. I need you to look at my pan, my plantain chips, and see how much plantain is in that much oil that I have. It's not too much. A lot of people tend to make this mistake. You see that they're frying plantain chips and because they want to finish on time, they overcrowd their pan. When you overcrowd your pan, your chips will come out soggy. Even when they look like they are dry, after a while, when you are done packing it, you notice that few days after you finish packing your chips, the chips become very soft. That's why you see people complaining, I fried my plantain chips too, and I noticed that first day it was very, very crunchy, but after 3 days it has become what? It has become soggy. That's because most times the chips do not have enough space to fry properly, so they don't come out crunchy, they just come out strong, and after a while you see them losing that crunchy texture. Another important tip in getting a crunchy plantain chips is that you get to watch your plantain chips and turn them when you need to. Don't leave it in the fire for too long so that it doesn't get burnt. Also, you have to know that you are not supposed to be turning it every minute or every second, because you don't want it to get burnt. Doesn't mean your hand has to be inside the oil and you won't move it, because if you keep putting your hands in the oil and turning the plantain, you won't give the plantain enough time inside the pan to get done. So for example, now see the way I'm moving these plantain chips, or I'm moving the chips from one side to the other. If I keep turning the plantain without giving it or allowing it time to rest, the plantain chips will not have the time that it needs to get done, and at the end of the day, plantain chips will come out soggy. So it's very important that while you're trying to maintain balance between not turning the plantain too much and turning the plantain, you have to keep it in mind that the plantain doesn't get soggy or gets burnt. Now, when you notice that the plantain chips has turned golden brown and the oil is no longer bubbling, I need you to look at the oil. You notice when I put the plantain chips, the first time I put the plantain into the oil, the plantain was bubbling, the oil was bubbling. Now you notice that all the bubbles has gone down, and it's going to be making a very tiny sound, and like a whistling sound. It means that the plantain is done and it is time for you to remove the plantain from fire. Do not leave the plantain more than that time, because if you do, it's going to get burned. Now, after removing the plantain, I like to put my plantain in a tissue paper towel to avoid it from having too much oil. The paper towel absorbs the oil very well. Some people like to put theirs in a sieve to drain out the oil, but I like to use a paper towel. Paper towel helps me absorb the oil. You notice I'm trying to put salt. So it is important that you put your salt when the plantain is still very warm and hot, because that is when the plantain is going to absorb its flavor. Whether you're adding garlic powder, onion powder, or salt, it's important that you put that at that moment. Can you see how beautiful these plantain chips look? Can you hear the sound? It's very crunchy. So if you liked what we did today, do give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. Bye.